Our speaker today, Dr. Makhtar Diop, has had 25 years of extensive experience working in some of the most crucial positions in public and private finance in and for Africa. He has been the World Bank's Vice President for the Africa region since 2012. He is the first person from a Francophone African country to hold this important position. Before taking up this position, he was the World Bank Country Director for Brazil between 2009 and 2012, and previously held the positions of Director of Strategy and Operations of the Latin America and Caribbean region, and Sector Director for Finance, Private Sector, and Infrastructure in the same region. Between 2002 and 2005, Dr. Diop was the bank's Country Director for Kenya, Eritrea, and Somalia. Before joining the World Bank, Dr. Diop worked at the International Monetary Fund and served as Minister of Economy and Finance in Senegal in 2001. He is credited with reforms in new information technology at the Treasury and in restructuring the Customs Directorate, which boosted revenue dramatically, despite the lower tariffs on trade with fellow members of the Economic and Monetary Union of West Africa. Dr. Diop is also credited with the launch of Standard & Poor's Sovereign Credit Rating of Senegal. A word about the World Bank in Africa. The bank partners with 48 countries in sub-Saharan Africa and finances approximately 500 projects in that region in areas such as agriculture, trade and transport, energy, education, health, water, and sanitation. It is an honor to have Dr. Diop launch this wonderful conference, and please join me in welcoming him to the podium.
Thank you so very much. Good morning, everybody. It's my huge pleasure to be here today at Michigan. It's the first time I'm visiting Michigan University, and it's an honor. I mean, I heard a lot about the university, read academic paper written by a famous member of the faculty, and I was asking about all variants that we all use. We all use this textbook on macroeconomics when we are studying microeconomics in graduate schools. And I was told that now he's in Google and he's reinvented the internet economics throughout the world. But I mean, the University of Michigan is famous in a very, very many areas, and it's a huge and tremendous honor today to be with you. And I would like really to thank all of you for inviting me to participate to this event. I will thank the minister who will join us later on by video conference, the vice provost, the member of the faculty, the student, ladies and gentlemen, and I will not go through all the protocol. But I would like just to thank everybody who has been contributing in organizing it and giving me this huge honor of joining you today. I'm delighted here today to speak about the challenges and opportunities for building science and technology capacity in Africa in partnership with global leaders in higher education such as the University of Michigan. Allow me first, as I indicated earlier, to thank specifically Professor Kumba and Kanate Asibu for organizing this event, but also the director for the African Studies Department here, and for their leadership in building partnership with African universities, and for bringing together specialists and practitioners who in an area of fields. And I was reminded that it's not only mathematics and science, but also social science. And it is important, as we all know, that politics also is important in making things happen. This is the first initiative of its kind, and is creating a powerful network of like-minded academics throughout the U.S. In the higher education community. The African Study Center here in Michigan clearly demonstrates the university commitment to deeply and meaningfully help the continent of Africa in science, technology, research, education, but also cultural event. And I can see the nice piece of cloth coming from Tanzania that you are wearing. The STEM Africa initiative has nurtured young scientists and advanced research network with institutions in Africa. And Young Presidential Scholars Program makes important contributions to career development of African faculty who come to Michigan and benefit from the mentorship of Michigan faculty. As we know, mentorship is a critical part, an essential part of any academic development in Africa, but throughout the world. So we thank very much the faculty member for making themselves available. The study abroad programs in South Africa, Ghana, Tanzania, and Kenya is also providing enriching opportunity for Michigan students to experience the continent. And I understand also that there's prospect of working with countries who have an accent which is similar to mine, and with countries also which have an accent which sounds a little bit more like Cabo Verde and Angola, and extend that community and that effort of the Michigan University to those parts of Africa. Thank you very much for also taking those efforts. STEM Africa is an issue that has been close to my heart, and for years it is crucial for African success in the 21st century. How we can build this and do even bigger, better things together is what we want to discuss today. As many of you know, more than 50% of the population of sub-Saharan Africa is younger than 25 years of age. And every year, in the next decade, about 11 million youth African will enter the job market. We're talking a lot about the demographic dividend. It was one of the discussions we had at the table yesterday during dinner. But this demographic dividend, which offers tremendous opportunity for Africa to build a valuable base of human capital, will only serve as an engine of economic growth and transformation if people are trained. It will only be a dividend if people are educated, are trained and employable. Otherwise, it's not a demographic dividend. As such, our challenge is to improve learning outcomes. After decades of limited engagement in post-secondary education, the World Bank Group and other partners are directing a long overdue focus on higher education and, most importantly, on the content of university studies and the skills students need to have to enter the job market and contribute to the African growth and development. We are now in Africa at a crossroad. The challenge is to make the leap to a famous yes we can to yes we do. And I think that Africa has accomplished and have done a lot recently. We have a very high growth rate in African standard, and actually at the time of the crisis of 2008 and 9, during that decade, Africa has been able to sustain a growth rate of 4.5%, which is underpinned by macroeconomic management, prudent one, and learning from the lesson of the past. Now it's time to build an economic growth that is accompanied by reducing poverty, inequality, and a greater value addition on the continent. With the new mineral discovery, seemingly every month, in Tanzania, in Kenya, in Uganda, the ability of Africans to extract, refine, and market these resources is increasingly important. With Africa's booming cities, the ability to feed urban populations through increased agricultural productivity and build enhanced infrastructure to deliver crops is critical to food security. And it's not just a trajectory of continued economic growth, it's also the sustainability of African growth. So disproportionate impact of climate change on Africa represent a robust opportunity for joint research. Yesterday we were talking about oceanography, and we talk about the coastal impact of rising sea levels, drought-related resistant seed and variety, renewable energy, and these are a few examples of the contribution of research to addressing and adapting African economies to climate change. And these are win-win benefits for scientists both in and outside the African continent. Similarly, collaborative work in medicine can build scientific knowledge for local and international physicians as building strong institutions will be critical to achieving the next breakthrough in disease such as HIV/AIDS. I would like here to pose a note that Africa, an example of collaboration between African researcher and international researcher has been exactly the work done on HIV/AIDS. As we know that the team led by Professor Mboup in Senegal, teaming with a team in Institut Pasteur in France, was at the basis of this discovery of the first trace of HIV/AIDS. And the point here is that Africa is not only absorbing knowledge generated from other places of the world, but is a huge source of knowledge generation. And I think the work in science and medical science is a good example. But in contrast to that, we have recently some reminders. The recent outbreak of Ebola in West Africa dramatizes the need for local capacity for testing, diagnostic, and laboratories. Today, I was talking to the Guinean authorities a couple of days ago, and they had to send samples in Europe to test for the Ebola virus in Guinea. There were no entities in the sub-region which could test efficiently that virus and be able to help addressing these dramas that we are currently seeing in Guinea. Likewise, the African biodiversity and the vast array of DNA barcoding offer extraordinary research opportunity for Africa and foreign scientists alike. How do we get from there, and how to achieve this value addition in Africa? We must correct long-standing imbalances in the educational systems in the continent and make up for long delays in developing science and technology capabilities in Africa. This is in part a legacy of our own history, our own colonial past, where school curricula were designed to produce a cadre of civil servants to administer the government, with an emphasis on non-scientific disciplines. Today, Africa's stocks of graduates with secondary and tertiary level skills is highly skewed towards humanities and social science, while the proportion of African students in science and technology is engineering and other related science averages less than 25% of the total number of graduates. I just want to say that I have it's not about not emphasizing the need for social science, and particularly for understanding the political economy of our countries, which is a critical element in implementing the right policies. Are we learning it and do it every day in our work with the World Bank? But the point that I want to make here is how to rebalance the overall stock and number of flows of people coming from our university. With 25% only of people coming from science, technology, engineering, and mathematics, we are limiting the capacity and possibilities of people in Africa to grow, and economic growth to be sustained in Africa. And in that particular context, I'm very glad that we have now a program that will be launched about engineering and women, because we know that women are underrepresented in science and technology-related courses and professions in the continent as well. Unfortunately, this is not an only phenomenon in Africa, but we are talking today about Africa, and we need to do a bit more about it. And I'm very glad to have the Michigan University really focusing on that and trying to develop a program for women engineers. To reverse this trend, the new generation of talented and ambitious young Africans must be equipped with modern skills and knowledge they need to formulate and implement African solutions for African challenges. And I emphasize African solutions because we are often talking about solutions which are not necessarily adapted to the reality of our continent. And the fact that we are STEM Africa is really a testimony of the willingness to adapt and adjust and embed the reality of scientific development in our Africa context and Africa reality. The imperative of STEM Africa, for STEM Africa is clear. You have mentioned it. And I would just like to highlight a couple of things. One of them is collaboration, which is critical to successful scientific endeavor. and African and US university have much to gain to joining forces. The African diaspora community here in the US represents a powerful engine for science and technology advancement in the continent, without whom it would be difficult to generate new interest in supporting the STEM field in Africa. Catalyzing the risk contribution of the African diaspora will require support for a range of stakeholders: policymakers, international financial institutions like the World Bank, academics, both here and in Africa. The US education system, higher education system, is a global leader in knowledge generation, with a significant number of Africans taking their degrees at American institutions. This partnership and this conference today marks a first important step in operationalizing the contribution of non-Africa-based institutions to building STEM capacity of the continent. And I would like to really emphasize the role of the diaspora. There is, as you know, it is an issue which is often discussed with different views, and I am of those who believe that having a diaspora is a huge asset for a country and a community and a continent. I don't believe that having professors like you sitting here will affect Africa development. I think it's been demonstrated in many papers, academic papers actually, that there have externalities in having a very strong diaspora working in countries with much advanced economies, much advanced education system. And it's clear that STEM Africa is a clear illustration that the diaspora, even when they are outside their own country, keep very strong link and very important link with their home countries. So I am among those who believe that diaspora is important, and the diaspora is a huge and important and essential part of the long-term development of our continent, and that's why I'm so pleased today to be here and to join you in that conversation. 3 weeks ago, I was in Rwanda on a forum on higher education, science, and technology, which features ministers from a number of African countries, as well as academics and scientists from notable partners countries such as India, China, and with a strong support from Brazil and Korea. What is clear is that during this discussion, African leaders were interested in hearing solutions and policies implemented in various parts of the world, being from the traditional countries which are partnering with African government, Europe and the US, but also to hear from emerging economies and to see what we can learn from these. And this is what I certainly is a good illustration for me of what I call African solution to African challenges. It's clear that the solutions that will come out from the work that STEM Africa is doing and other partners are doing in the development of higher education and science in Africa will be a combination of different experiences coming from the former colonial countries to the new emerging economies, and this bouillabaisse, to use a French term, this mix will be certainly what will be bringing the salsa, the Latin American salsa, to Africa. It will be a mixture of everything, and it will be a solution which is an African solution. When I am asked sometime in some controversial terms, which model Africa is choosing? Is it the China model? Is it the American model? Is it the European model? I say it's the African model. And I believe strongly that Africa today doesn't want to be boxed in one category, but wants to create its own box and sit in it and make that box known to the rest of the world. And I think that what we are seeing now in every forum that I'm attending is that willingness to develop the African voice and to articulate it and make it known. So today's conference that we had in Kigali closed with a call to action that set ambitious goal to the strategic investment in science and technology to accelerate Africa's development into a knowledge-based society within one generation. Specifically, the conference set a bold target of doubling the percentage of African university graduates in the science and technology fields within a decade, by 2025. These two offer a lesson to be learned from the past, where African countries and development partners altogether focus on reaching universal primary enrollment, but without enough emphasis on quality. We need, as we increase the share of a graduate trade in science and technology, to keep quality. We now see the importance of learning outcomes and actual service delivery. Training in science, technology, and mathematics is critical to improving the quality of instruction and learning, to train mathematics, secondary teacher in mathematics and science, for example. Instruments to improve educational quality include many instruments that you are very familiar with. For instance, as we are moving towards increasing the number of graduates in Africa in science and technology, can we think about systematizing external examiner, I don't know how you say exactly, to African university. We noticed that the last decade, the last 20 years, have revealed some weaknesses in our higher education systems, and we need to try to correct them. And one of them is really to ensure that the right benchmarking in terms of quality is kept over time. And you professors here are very much used in using this instrument, and we should be thinking very much about how to try to expand those instruments to African institutions which are currently being developed, external examiner. And yesterday, it was very interesting over lunch. Professor Kumba came with a very nice idea that maybe we should think about why not to anchor the quality of our program, think about an African GRE, which will be a good opportunity to ensure comparability and consistency of the quality of people coming from our higher education institution in Africa. Those are the kind of objectives that I would like us to start discussing, and I hope that this conference will start discussing and defining very concrete steps and measures towards addressing the challenges that we are currently discussing. There are these objectives of doubling by 2025 the number of graduates coming from higher education in science and technology is a bold objective. But I believe that without a bold objective, we will not be able to really achieve our goals of reducing poverty and keeping Africa on a path of sustained growth. And that will be requiring to make tough choices. Choices by African countries, choices by us, international organizations, by partners, foundation, by universities outside Africa. And everybody will have to start changing the paradigm and try to embrace this ambitious agenda. There have been a number of initiatives in recent years. For instance, the African University of Science and Technology in Abuja. This type of initiative, which have been creating a lot of excitement on the continent, needs to be taken to scale and consolidated in a bold initiative across the continent. And that's a reason why we are trying now to work with the African Center of Excellence. And these African Center of Excellence will require an important on our side an important feature, which is selectivity and selectivity. This Center of Excellence and Higher Education in Science and Technology, as we know, is very expensive and require coordinated investment from various countries to optimize the limited resources and create synergy across sub-regional groups of countries. I don't pretend that it's an easy decision. Where to locate a particular center of excellence is a matter of national pride, and politics are often a factor. But we need to work through those issues and try to see how we can optimize and be selective. So World Bank has ongoing operations that support science and technology in Nigeria, Tanzania, and Senegal. And later this month, we will be presenting to our board what we call Africa Center of Excellence project, which will bring together universities across the continent to address common development challenges. The project will focus on key sectors, including extractive industry, energy, environment, health, ICT. And I would like to say that my colleague Andrea is here, who will be responding. Where is Andrea? Yeah, and you can ask him all the questions you want about this project, because he will be the one. He's the one who is responsible for it. So the first phase will be covering West Africa and Central Africa. Will be presented to our board, and we would like to launch a second phase. We'll be covering East Africa of the same nature, where we will try to identify some center of excellence and try to support them. Working together, these regional partners can build joint laboratories, for instance, set common standards for research and development, and most importantly, share knowledge and expertise. The STEM Africa Coalition brings together a powerful way of all of you gathered today, the foundations, the private sector, and international financial institutions like ours, to be aligned around a priority set by the African academic community. And I think being aligned behind the priorities. As we moved in this initiative, it's clear that eagerness that sometimes we all have make us forget that we are not the main actors. And the actors have a way, a voice to express and can articulate what they want. And I think that the challenge is in our eagerness to be able to always refrain from running too fast and not listening to the countries and the academics who are in the continent. So I'm very impressed that you are using the technology to record all the comments today and share it with the community at large in Africa, which can provide us with some feedback of the direction that we would like to take in this particular area. And I think that one of the challenges would be to start articulating a vision that is clearly defined, clearly operationalized, and that we can all line behind, as we're trying to do now with the CADEP in agriculture in Africa, or other initiatives which are led by African institutions and African leaders through the African Union. And I'm very glad that you mentioned earlier the African Union as being the center point. Beyond the border of the continent, we are very much interested in what's happening also in some emerging economies, Brazil, China, India, and Korea, under the umbrella of our partnership for applied science and technology, PASET. This South-South learning for us is important, is a rich source of knowledge, and to help the higher education capabilities in Africa, in African institutions. And I think that if we, having lived 3 years in Brazil, I know that the collaboration that a university in Brazil university have established with academic institutions in the US has been critical in accelerating the scientific development at USP, University of Sao Paulo, of University of Minas Gerais. Those universities have been able to build a very strong scientific program and science programs in a base. And more recently, even a country like Brazil, which has created a large number of scientists, have been decided with President Dilma to have a very large program of sending PhD students in the US in science and technology to be able for them to fill the gap that they are seeing is important. So already a lot has been done in that area, trying to bring that quality, that link between African universities, institutions, and university like the University of Michigan. One of the instruments was what we call the sandwich program that play an important role. And I know it's expensive, and that's one of the challenges that we need to think about, and how to use those instruments in a more economically effective way. But university in Africa needs to achieve a next level in the back home. A number of US and European universities have built campuses and programs overseas, notably in Asia and the Middle East. But the next frontier is Africa. So one challenge that I would like to put here to University of Michigan is when will we be having a University of Michigan campus in Africa? This will be something that I hope will happen sometime in my lifetime, and I think that it's an important part of the next frontier is really in Africa. So and I think that the first movers will have a very strong advantage. And it's not something that is just one of my dreams. It's happening. Actually, I will not name it, but one of the important American university set a master program in IT in Rwanda, and the first graduate from this master program will graduate sometime in September in Africa with a degree from a known American university who have taken other classes and courses in Africa. So this is a challenge that maybe looking towards the 2025 objective that we are setting, that together we can try to work on. I know that it raises a lot of questions. I know that it's very difficult to convince the board of governors, but let's make a try and let's try to see what is possible in this area. And I understand that a very important person is coming in this city, in this town very soon. Maybe he can have some ideas and suggestions about how to finance it and help it. This is an important example for me of cooperation and support for a foreign university. And I think that this is not something which is impossible at all. There is a certain number of things that people thought that were not possible to achieve, and Africa has been able to achieve in the last few decades. So the university, as I indicated, will be the first mover. We have a strong advantage because beyond the financial resources that a country can transfer to another country, the best way of influencing a country and having an impact on a country is to really train generation on generation of people. And I think that this is something that from a standpoint of a great nation like the US, there will be certainly interest in making sure that the education systems, the values that this country has are widely shared through the next generation, and doing it through the educational system and the higher education is certainly one of the best way of doing it. We see people from Morocco who come back to Michigan after they leave the country. We see people from Cameroon. We see people from all the parts of the world. When you leave, you go back. I was trained in the UK, so I tend sometimes to go to the UK and France. But I'm learning about the US education system, and I'm very excited about it. And now I'm being kind of looked by my former professors as a little bit of having crossed the Atlantic and dealing more with American universities than UK and French universities. But this is the power of the US educational system, and I think that there is a strong proposition of increasing the supply of courses of university in Africa. So partnership is clear a key element of quality and depth of scientific education. And we also need to think about what students will be applying once they come out from the programs that you are pushing for. Part of the solution is to engage the private sector to support this center of excellence, to make sure that people, when they are going to university, are not going only to learn a nice equation, a nice modeling, but which has nothing to do with the African reality. When working on oceanographic issues or climate change, looking at the African condition, the African climate is central for Africa, instead of doing it in an environment which has nothing to do with our own reality. So, and for that, a good proxy is really the private sector. Bring in the private sector. For example, we know that extractive industry today are investing a lot in Africa. So we can, one of the objectives is to start bringing those companies to fund university program in science and technology, and therefore invest in the next generation of technicians and corporate recruits. It requires innovative partnerships and coalitions. Funding this university cannot be the sole responsibility of the public sector. Closer links between university and the private sector will help, ensure that people are graduating with the proper skills. And I know that Ghana and other countries have been starting from interesting initiatives that we might want to replicate in the continent. I'm also encouraged to see that African Minister of Higher Education are boosting the private sector representation in the university boards to get employers involved in vocational training programs and also to work directly with the private sector on curriculum design. We are encouraging to see also the private sector partners in Africa offering apprenticeship, offering internship, certification programs, and to help bridge the gap between what is being taught in university and the reality of the job market. This has always been a major strength of the United States, and I think that is something that Africa needs to learn a lot. And I'm pleased to see that a number of African institutions right now are moving towards the same direction and trying to replicate the US model in terms of private sector involvement in higher education. I understand that public universities in Kenya and were the first to pursue academic reform and open their board to representatives from the private sector and civil society. And the same is happening in Senegal. I'm sure that Minister Makhtar Diop will tell you more about it, where strengthening links with employer is a key element of a new reform agenda to improve the quality and relevance of higher education. Some prominent members of the private sector are already moving, and we are about to sign a memorandum of understanding around the annual meeting, the spring meeting of the World Bank, with some notable private sector leaders from Africa, and to see how we can work with them to strengthen science and education training in Africa. This is something new, and I think that it needs to be encouraged very, very strongly. What I would like also to see more is how we can create the same type of interest for the corporate world in the US to also start investing in education, because I think there is something very, very interesting. I was very interested to see one of the leading IT firms creating some incubation centers in Kigali. And I think this is a kind of things which are very cost effective, which could make a big difference in the future for. So as we undertake this initiative, the key is a shared commitment, a coherent and coordinated approach to make sure that all these programs are coordinated and to avoid duplication. Let's set a shared objective so that by the end of the year we commit to present an agreed set of critical action to African heads of states and policymakers for their consideration. If they are on those, we will commit to work together to implement them. I look forward, really, very forward to be continuing to working with you and to help, African countries to deploy the best and the brightest to address Africa challenges. And students here in the audience today, the doctoral researchers of tomorrow that you are and your professor are well placed to engage in academic exchanges in Africa to help meet these ambitious goals. And I welcome all your ideas and suggestions. And I'm very honored to have been given the opportunity to say a few words to kick off these important conference that you are launching. But I am in Michigan at a time where we are talking about basketball. So I cannot end my speech without talking about basketball. And I think that what we saw this weekend is an interesting example of what is an inspiration for us. The last few seconds, the buzzer, 3-pointers, the dagger, and Michigan is out. Kids are on the floor screaming and crying, and there is a lot of disappointment. And you can understand the disappointment of these players who sacrifice years and years of practice and training, who've been spending hours and hours in the field to lose a game at the last second with the 3-pointers. You can understand that. They were down and there were things. But what did we notice is right after they stood up and said, we will be back next year. So I say we'll be back next year and we'll do better. We'll do what our colleague reminding me is that when the Michigan University won in the 80s the last championships, the city was in a full and total excitement. They wanted to see it again. And why it's an inspiration? Because we are engaging in a very, very difficult and long journey. We will have a last-second three-pointers scored against us. The small communities that we are today of people who believe in science and technology. We will have a lot of political obstacles on our way. We will fall. We will be short of financing. We sometimes will disagree. We sometimes agree to disagree. But so what? We will fall sometime, but I'm sure that we will get up and be ready for the next championships, because it's a long championships, and I think that Africa can and will really bring the cup back home. Thank you.